Good to see you, Jane. Welcome. We finally got the tape growing, and welcome very much to Conversations. And in the audience, welcome very much to the program. Our guest here for this segment is Dr. Jane G. Goldberg, Ph.D., psychoanalyst, and we're going to be talking about the incredible life's work that she's been engaged in that continues, and she's really very, very busy. I was just joking with her. I have her CV, and it goes on for page after page after page after page of the activities she's been involved in. I won't even bother trying to put it up in the camera.
God,
but
Harold,
welcome.
you're going to make it sound like I don't have a life.
No, you've got a great life. You just filled it with all kinds of good activity,
like
and welcome.
Sounds
welcome.
like I just work.
No. Well, work is really important, I think, but welcome.
I actually don't sleep very much. I only need 4 hours of sleep.
Really?
So my best work is between about 4 or 5 in the morning, and then before my daughter wakes up, she gets up at 7 to get ready for school.
Well, 4 or 5 in the morning. You're still up from the night before?
No.
No, you get up early.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, that's the difference. 4 hours only. Yeah,
I go to sleep at midnight, and then
good for you.
Usually around 4 or 5 I'm up
Bucky
and I'm
Fuller.
writing.
Bucky Fuller, my hero, used to sleep up 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And he would take cat naps. He could take cat naps. He would just go to sleep for 10 minutes.
I think actually there's some new research that shows that that actually is healthier for the brain.
Yeah, I think a lot. Edison was the same. You know, I was from Detroit, and Edison was all there. Anyway, share with us your background, please, Jane. You were born in some of your education. Then we want to talk about psychoanalysis, where it fits into the psychiatric understanding. We ought to talk a word or two about Mr. Freud and things that it's based on. But share your own background, if you would, please.
Ask me a question.
Okay, where did you go to? Where were you born?
I was born in New Orleans.
Okay, New Orleans,
home
the
of
Big
Katrina.
Easy, huh? Yeah, home of Katrina. Okay.
And I swore after Katrina I'd never go back. I didn't think I would be able to tolerate seeing the devastation. And then a few years after that, my uncle died.
Yeah.
He was a well-known figure in New Orleans. He was the head of the Psychoanalytic Society there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I see. That would have been
So
an
they
early
had a
influence.
big memorial, and I had to go down for it. And
Yeah.
so now I go down all the time
That's
again.
relatively recent. So that's maybe a hint as to how your uncle helped get you towards psychoanalytic training?
No, not in the least.
Not in the least. Okay, but you were born there, you went to school there, you went to your family, that kind of thing, a little bit, just to ground it, okay? And then we want to get on the education and then your vast output of writing and participation in improving the human condition.
Well, how about my first car was a TR3?
Really? Okay, that's good. Now, that's important stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, in New Orleans it is, because the driving age was 15.
15?
And everybody was driving when they were 12.
Oh, yeah. That was I used to remember sitting in front and we were practicing driving in the I could hardly see over the windscreen, practicing shifting the gears.
Well, you know, because Brittany,
Yeah.
you know, the only Brittany,
Yeah.
because she's from not far away from
really?
New Orleans, and she had her little baby on her lap, and
Yeah.
she was driving,
Yeah.
and the whole media criticized her. You can't do that. That's illegal.
Yeah.
Child has to be in a car seat.
Yeah.
So, of course, my father, she said her defense was, well, I'm just a country girl, and that's the way we do it down south.
And that's true.
It is true.
It is true.
I was always on my father's
Right.
lap, and
Yeah.
my daughter was driving when she was 6 months old because she was on my lap. But, of course, we didn't go on real roads.
What was your daddy up to?
He owned an auto parts store.
Okay, yeah, okay. And your mother?
My father grew up in southern Georgia.
Southern Georgia. Okay.
There were little enclaves
Yeah.
in the South where the Jew, the only Jew for 50 miles.
Had a hard time getting the pastrami, huh?
No, with no pastramis and no bagels. There were only dry
I think
goods.
you had a hard time getting it, yeah. Yeah.
So he owned a dry goods store.
Right.
And my father got on his Harley Davidson when he was 18.
Okay.
The joke was that he went to college. He drove up to New York. He went in the front door of NYU and right out the back door.
Right.
And then he went back and then drove west to New Orleans.
Okay.
And it was at a time when you couldn't just go out and the government didn't really make it easy to get license plates if you had a car. People were just getting cars.
Right.
So my mother was getting a car.
Yeah.
And she said, how do I get a license plate? And somebody said, well, you have to call this guy. I guess they had phones back then.
Yeah.
You have to call this guy My Goldberg. And so she called My Goldberg, and he got her a license plate, and then they fell in love.
Oh, I see. And they got married, and then the family, you got sisters and brothers and that? And was it a warm, friendly, intellectually curious, encouraging family setting you came up in?
My father was just very basic, very down-to-earth, kind of a grunt, talking kind of person. And my mother was way smarter than the culture allowed her to be.
Right, yeah, I understand that. You can probably have some redolence of that in your own life's experience, perhaps. I don't know. History is a nightmare. No, well, anyway, yeah. Okay, and so you were encouraged intellectually and so forth? You went to school in that, or?
No, I
because
just
you've
was
had a heck
regular,
of an intellectually curious and important
no, that came
career.
later. It wasn't from high school.
It wasn't.
I think it started in college. I took a course in Judaic Studies. And
down in New Orleans?
St. Louis, Washington, U.
St. Louis, Washington. Oh, you had got to St. Louis on your own. You were away from the family setting then?
College.
The only reason I go into all of this is it seems to me you had a couple things in the writings I perused, and one is you say we pay so much attention to intellectual IQ, we say so little to emotional IQ, if we could put that term on it, and then also that what we don't pay enough attention, those early months when we come out of the conditioning that's going on within the environment is so important to the consciousness that's emerging. So I try to to get things rooted in those early experiences, it seems to me.
I have a patient who said in her session last week, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
And I said, it happened because you went to college. She came from a very religious upbringing, and she went to college, and she began to think independently, and now she is not religious, and she's living in sin according to her parents because she's with her boyfriend, and it's you leave people that leave home. I think are really different than people that stay home throughout their adult life. And I come from a background of people leaving home. I mean, my father's family escaped the Tsar. My mother's family, they didn't have to leave, but they wanted to leave. They came from Alsace-Lorraine. So when I went back to my first high school reunion, and I saw all the girls that had gone to Sophie Newcomb, that
was the high school?
Sophie Newcomb is the women's part of Tulane.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Tulane. And then they married a local boy, and they were still living in New Orleans, and they were basically living the lives that their mothers had lived. And they were really different than I was, who had who had gone away to college, moved to New York. People that have a curiosity about the rest of the world, as opposed to people that are satisfied with whatever it is that was their experience, and growing up that's perfectly fine.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
I think it's just a whole different world.
Yeah, it is a different thing where people are more venturous, and both intellectually and physically in terms of their physiography and everything. But those early experiences for the infant are really important, it seems to me. The setting.
You're talking about very early.
I'm talking out of the womb.
Yeah,
and it's so important and everything, and they tend to very often, we don't pay enough attention to what's going on at that level because the pattern is being set, it seems to me, very early.
It's earlier.
You know what I'm saying?
It's earlier than
or
you
maybe
think.
it's prenatal even.
It's prenatal. I'm going to tell you about a study.
And I think psychoanalysis is very interested in those kind of things that are so at the core of the consciousness.
This study was done in Italy, and this study could never be done in the U.S.
Okay.
But a psychoanalyst decided to take sonograms of twins that are in utero.
Right.
And so she would take a sonogram of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. So you'd see one baby brother in utero over the back, curled over the back of the other baby brother.
These are fraternal twins.
In utero.
Yeah, right.
And then she followed them post-utero.
Okay.
And the same position that you'd see these babies, these fetuses in utero, you'd see 3 months, you'd see them in the crib, and they'd be in the same position.
No fooling.
And
really?
Then when they were a year old, you'd see them in the bathtub, and they were in the same position. And then you'd see another set of twins, for instance, and you'd see one twin with his right leg kicking the arm of the other twin. And then you'd see in the crib, same kick. And then you'd see in the playpen, same kick. And
what does it tell us? What does it tell us?
It tells us that character develops in utero.
Uh-huh. Could we trace it back to the first fertilization of the ovum or something? Or is it genetic? Where are those things coming from in terms of the way we understand? We're looking at an individual personality and all of the convoluted things that go into making it. It's so complex, it's impossible to deal with in any real depth and everything, but it's very interesting. But, I mean, so we usually talk about we got nurture and then we got nature. We got genetic input and so on. How do we look at it, and how did Mr. Freud influence us in terms of understanding things differently than we had coming into the 19th century? I don't know if that's relevant or not.
Oh, my God. You just asked 3 really big questions.
Okay.
Let's break them down.
Okay, good, yeah.
Let's
because this is your bailiwick. Yeah, okay.
So genetics, yes, that study certainly indicates that either constitutionally and what we come into the world with, which might be genetics or it might just be constitution, that it's very powerful as a formative influence. Yeah. Having said that, I would like to say that I really do believe that we supersede genes, that we can, that we have the power to, and that leads me into my interest in holistic health.
Okay,
and psychoanalysis too.
Yeah, and they're kind of together. Yeah, okay.
So for instance, we now know that there's a genetic component to shyness.
Is that true? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But one does not have to suffer from shyness. One can come to learn other neurological, neuronal patterns in the brain.
By psychotherapy or
by resolving conflicts emotional conflicts that lead to shyness. So I believe you can rewire the brain.
You rewire?
Yeah.
Because we now know about the neurotransmitters. We didn't know that 30, 45 years ago. First was acetylcholine, I think. It's not hardwired. The brain isn't hardwired. It's, these different neurotransmitters that set up uptake and everything.
It's what we call plastic.
Okay, it is. It's malleable.
Exactly.
Perhaps more than we think, and that's where the nurturing part comes in, or the environment. And the nurturing that comes when you're coming out of the womb, you're in a nurturing environment, hopefully. One that is not bringing trauma.
No, you're not in a nurturing environment. The way birth is done in this country is not nurturing at all. It's hugely traumatic.
That's a good place to begin for an individual, because that's when, we were in utero. But, I mean, once we get to that, that's important and not as much given the importance that maybe it should be, not only here in the country of the United States of America, but also the world. Or what do you think?
Well, there are some people
psychoanalytically.
There's some people that have paid attention to it. One of the early psychoanalysts, I think it was Adler, talked about the birth. No, Ronk talked about the birth trauma.
Okay.
And Freud's position was separation, the separation that we get from birth trauma, where we're actually first connected biologically and then unconnected as soon as the umbilical cord is cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing, isn't it?
He says it's the trauma from which we spend the rest of our lives recovering.
Okay, that's interesting. That's the beginning point.
Now, my specific interest is in the process of separation, and of course it only begins there, and the reason why I'm interested in that is because as a mother, I have kind of tracked my daughter's whole evolution of being completely tied to me, completely symbiotic, and now at almost 16 and a month, I'm irrelevant.
Yeah, I know. That's a really tough time when they had to break away. And it seems to be patterns that are built in genetically to the species and so on. But that's a very interesting thing. When you say the birth trauma, the birth trauma is experienced by the infant going from a warm, nurturing, safe, secure environment, enclosed, out into a world with a lot of lights and noise and everything, and it's a paradigm shift.
But it doesn't have to be done that way.
Okay, talk to us. Yeah.
Well, there are people that understand that it would be nice if it were more gentle, and there are people that do water births and.
The water birth is there. They had Lamaze. They used to do. Is that relevant? That's from the standpoint of the mother,
Yeah, Lamaze just has to do with the birth process.
Yeah, right. With the birth process.
With labor.
The psychological implications of all that big transformation. He used to also talk, didn't he, about the death wish, or did he? Freud. Freud was a giant in terms of understanding the processes that have been all wrapped up in ignorance in the past. I don't know if it's relative to say, just the whole psychological, the whole neurological organization of an organism. He was such a giant, I have a hard time. He's right there with the giants, it seems to me, in terms of the way he identified the process.
We have translated the instinct into death. It's really thanatos. That's the word that he used. And eros is the other one, the counterforce. And those words are really better because it's really much larger than death.
Okay.
And it's much larger than love.
Okay.
So in terms of what you're referring to as the death instinct, and what is generally referred to as the death instinct.
Or death wish, sometimes it's called in some literature.
More than that is saying that we return to that from which we came, which is dust to dust.
Yeah.
And that when a psychoanalyst uses the word wish, it's not wish in the way that we use that word in an everyday sense.
Right.
It's that there is a predilection for moving in that direction, and it's built in. It's biological in us.
Okay.
So we're going to die. That's basically what it means.
That's a
biggie. We're all moving towards dying.
That's a big issue.
But what is really significant about what he meant is that incorporated into the death instinct is the predilection for aggression. That we all have aggression in us, and that's really what Freud has been roundly criticized for.
Okay.
And he's what we call a dual drive theorist, that we have two drives, the drive to fuse and to be together and to be symbiotic and to love and to have nice feelings, warm, fuzzy, and then we have the counteracting force of death, aggression, separation, fission versus fusion. So
could that ever be confused with male versus female, or east versus west, or any of the dialectics that we come up with to try to understand what's going on?
I think they're all dialectics because we have two hemispheres in our brain.
We do, don't we? Yeah, we're bipedal. I noticed most of us. Yeah, that kind of thing. And it's sort of okay. So we understand things better all the time.
So people that are not dual drive theorists that just want one drive, they want to think that the one drive is love and unity, and that people are born good and only their environment makes them bad. But Freud's point of view is very different from that.
Okay.
And his point of view is that it is built into us that we are led towards destruction, towards wanting destruction, acts of destruction, thoughts of destruction, wishes for destruction. So when you understand that we have an inexorable movement toward that, your whole conceptual frame is very different. How you see the world and how you see people is very different.
And its birth and its movement, and it can be understood, written into the scientific. Well, we've had all kinds of spiritual traditions where we've tried to understand these things that are there, part of our consciousness and so forth. And then you could trace, I wonder, can we trace it back through the evolutionary process itself? There was consciousness before there was human consciousness.
I think spiritual traditions are not so interested in this aspect of humanity.
Well, then scientifically, we can trace back the evolutionary process of which we're a part, and we're a contributor of, and so forth, back through time.
Well, there's no problem with seeing that animals have aggression. I mean, anthropologists see that all the time.
Right.
But there seems to be a bit of a problem to remember that we ourselves are animals.
We are animals, but that.
So my dogs tend to be bitey sometimes. My brain is, pretty close to that. My dog's brain that just bites people indiscriminately.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's like a 1% difference.
Between what?
Between my pet dog's brain and my brain.
Okay, it would be more than that.
It may be more, but it's not more than 5%. I forget what it is.
Oh well, no, it's about 1.5% between a human Homo sapien and a chimpanzee, and there have been studies where the difference between I think I may be wrong, but there's studies between, let's say, one dialectic that we're very aware of is the male-female principles that are maybe as functions in universe rather than Homo sapien characteristics or people or gender. but it's more functions in universe, because we've had this dialectic being part of the evolutionary process from the primordial ooze. There was a time before there was no sexual reproduction. 8/10 of it was just bacteria, and it's there. So it's all interrelated, one whole system. We're part of one whole system, including evolution through time. And so we finally get to where we have Homo sapien, but there's been a long train leading up the hominoid line to there. So it's all part of a thing. It's built into the universe. These principles are built into the universe, it would seem, that he brought, Mr. Freud brought expression to through this dialectic of birth, death, love, and then
aggression.
Aggression. Aggression would be associated perhaps with the West, in some people's mind, technological extension of consciousness that's unique to humanity, the male principle, that kind of thing, or am I getting all off base by
I think the gender difference actually is an important point.
You do, okay. Gender, not just male or female functions in universe that would be fit into a gender pattern.
No, yes.
Okay.
But both of those. I think gender is a subset of male-female principle.
Most women tend to be, males tend to be, males tend to be male. Most men tend to be male, and most females tend to be female in their principle. And I saw, help me say.
I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say most women object to this. And that, I got my Ph.D. I think I got it in about 78. I got it in the height of feminism.
Okay, boy.
And it was not popular then to say, in fact, there were departments that were founded that did not like the theory that there really is a difference between the male brain and the female brain.
Right.
But there's a lot of research that indicates it.
You would be able to fit me in, because I go around, and I told you on the telephone the other day, I've got about a quarter-inch knowledge in every field in the world. I mean, but I don't know the details. There's details under every subject you can get to, great detail and so on. But and you have to just rely upon a sort of subjective judgment of how valid a particular piece of information is that you have floating around in your head and so on. And I had one where the difference between from genome research and so forth, where they could take a reading of the genome in such a way that science, every day there's a new discovery coming over the transom that just is so revolutionary. But they said that they could measure an average. You can set me straight, I hope, on this, because I go around saying this and maybe I shouldn't. But that the average difference between an average Homo sapien female and an average Homo sapien male is something on the order of 1.5% difference in the genome, and that is it's not just plumbing. It's a whole thing that relates to whole consciousness and everything. Huge difference between the two, and that's about the same difference between Homo sapien as a species and our nearest ancestor, a chimpanzee. Does that ring true at all?
1.5% is huge. Let me tell you.
Yes, but is it correct? Are we correct in that? Am I correct in that piece of knowledge? Or am I just saying something I shouldn't say because it's wrong?
Sacha Baron Cohen, you know who he is?
No, I don't, sorry.
He's a funny guy. He made a movie.
Okay, I might, but I don't recall. I know what you mean.
Okay, your audience will know who he is.
Yeah, okay, good.
His uncle is Simon Baron Cohen.
Okay.
And he heads the autism department at either Cambridge or Oxford.
Okay.
And he started studying boy babies and girl babies day one.
Right.
Day one, boy babies will look at a mobile. Day one, girl babies will look at a human face.
Okay.
6 months, boy babies are still looking at the mobile, and girl babies are still looking for a human face.
Okay.
The brain is entirely different.
Between them. So the 1.5% might be actually accurate if you were to get a measurement of the difference between an average female and an average male Homo sapien.
I think the difference in brain between female and male.
Not only brain, everything. Yeah.
Well, I think brain determines most things.
Yeah, most everything is,
It's either brains or hormones.
And how do we get to these things called emotional IQ? And so I once did a program with B.F. Skinner, who's a behavioralist. He said there's no such thing as emotions. There's nothing but conditional response and all this. So you get different interpretations, and we're learning more all the time. But do you think I'm walking around talking and having that concept in my mind? There's that much difference between a man and a woman, Homo sapien, as 1.5% the same between the species taken collectively and a chimpanzee?
Well, why is it that my patients who are married all come in to try to work out the differences between the wife and the husband and how it is that they learn to communicate or not.
Yeah.
Because they use language differently,
right.
their emotions are different.
right.
Everything about them
And we have
different.
endless jokes about who can ever understand a woman and who can ever understand a man. And it goes on. It's been there in the literature and and everything. It's been a difference.
You know, Deborah Tannen, she analyzed language.
Okay.
And how it is that females talk differently than males.
They do, and they relate differently.
And thus why there's so much misunderstanding.
Right. It has been there. That's the difference that exists there. I think the difference is maybe operative in universe. I think it's better maybe to go back to those as functions in universe. Perhaps. I don't know. But that's another issue. But back to the unlining of you went to school. How did you get into psychiatry or psychology, that interest, and then into psychoanalysis? And how can we deal with psychoanalysis as part of the canon, as it were, of understanding human consciousness?
You did it again. You asked me 3 questions in one sentence.
Sorry. No, it's just, how did you get into that, if I could?
How did I get into psychoanalysis?
Yeah, into that field of thing. You could have done business. You could have got a law degree. You could have got, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, after college, I was kind of, at loose ends, not really knowing where I wanted to go.
And in college, you did what?
I majored in religious studies.
Religious studies?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. See, it was yes, okay.
My first love.
How come?
My first love was parapsychology.
Oh, parapsychology.
Yeah. I used
you were
to
coming
do
up in the 60s?
I would do these card tricks when I was like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And there's this one trick where you lay out the cards and you collect it 3 times, and if you do it in the right way, the card always ends up, the card the person picked always ends up in the same spot.
It's just, how did that happen?
It's mathematical, but after I would pick up the cards, I would always know, before I laid out even the first time, I would know which card the person had picked. And I would meet people for the first time, and I would tell them their birthdays.
Yeah.
So I was psychic. My mother was psychic.
Psychic, okay.
My mother, when somebody was about to find out they were pregnant, my mother always knew, because she would have a dream of somebody dying. And she would figure out, okay, well, I just had a death dream, so I know somebody's pregnant. Now, whose turn is it to have a baby? And she would always figure it out.
Okay.
So my mother was psychic. I was psychic.
Psychic. Okay. Yeah.
So I wanted to be a parapsychologist.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I did do that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. My Ph.D. actually is in the program at City University, and I trained under Gertrude Schmeidler, who was she was was the grandmother of research, real research, hard research in parapsychology.
Okay, very good. Parapsychology is in. You had all that stuff. They had a lot of stuff going on in the Soviet Union, studying psychic phenomena and that kind of thing. Krippner.
They're so leaps and bounds ahead. Yeah, Stanley Krippner.
Stanley Krippner was a friend I knew. Yeah. And they were studying that, and then we had all kinds of things going on. But it was the age of Aquarius coming, and in the 60s, it was there great interest in parapsychology. Okay, but and so that got you interested in consciousness and psychological processes and so on. And then you went on to study.
Well, then I came to New York, and so, I was in a graduate program and trying to figure out what I was going to do, and somebody invited me to a seminar. Right. And there were 5 different analysts, and they were of a group they called themselves modern analysts.
And these were psychoanalysts? In the Freudian tradition?
In the Freudian tradition, but called modern it was a school of thought within psychoanalysis called modern psychoanalysis. Oh,
that was a break. That was a subdivision within the psychoanalytic community.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a break.
The psychoanalytic community is separate from the whole people who are concerned with things of consciousness and psychology.
There are different schools that focus on different aspects of Freud. Sort of like within the broad psychoanalytic.
Yeah, and Freud was the giant.
Freud was the daddy of them all.
The daddy. So, like Darwin is to evolution?
Yes.
Okay.
So modern psychoanalysis was founded by a man named Hyman Spotnitz, and then Phyllis Meadow founded an institute that taught it. Okay. And so this was being sponsored by the institute that Phyllis Meadow was the head of. Right. And so I went there, and I saw these 5 people having a little panel discussion about working with patients and about their ideas about psychoanalysis. And this is what struck me, and it was really a
epiphany?
Powerful, not an epiphany, but a very powerful experience for me.
Okay, right, understand.
I saw 5 different people that had all been analyzed by Hyman Spotnitz, so they all had the same analyst.
Right.
And they were as different as black and white.
Interesting, interesting.
And what I saw is that each of them fully embodied who they were and who they were meant to be.
Huh.
And I concluded that this man, Hyman Spotnitz, that he conducted an analysis in such a way that it helped people to fill out their own being, to become who they were. And I wanted that experience. I wanted to become...
I would like that for everyone.
To become who I am.
Yeah, okay, right. Really, truly, at the deepest level of understanding and everything. That's
not just understanding, but how I express my...
Yeah, right, expression, Well, wouldn't it be, in a certain sense, since we're thinking in big terms, wouldn't that be something we would like, if it were possible, for every conscious being, every Homo sapien sentient being within our system, to be in such a state of relationship to the broader environment? Wouldn't that be like a liberation or something?
That's what we're working for.
Yeah, that's what you're working for, the psychoanalytic particularly. And that inspired you then, I would presume.
It inspired me to hire one of those people as my analyst.
Okay.
I picked Phyllis Meadow.
Okay.
And it inspired me to train to become a modern analyst.
It's a long process. Did you have to, excuse me for my ignorance, do you have to be a psychoanalyst, do you have to be a psychiatrist?
No.
And you don't have to go the medical route at all?
No, there was a big fracture in the whole psychoanalytic world.
Okay.
The people from this country that wanted to train to be an analyst in the early days all went to Vienna and trained with Freud.
Right, right.
Most of them were MDs, but Freud believed that this is a profession that anybody can do if you have an interest in it and you have an understanding of the concepts and you're smart enough and in touch with your feelings enough. And so he trained people, So then it came over to this country, and it was, when it was imported, it went to the University of Chicago, and it became subsumed by the medical school there. And so, yes, in the beginning, you had to be an MD.
Okay.
Then Theodore Reich was trained.
Okay, yeah.
And he came over to New York, because he was a New Yorker.
Right.
And he wanted to start an institute for non-MD, what we now call lay analysts.
Okay.
And the MD analysts all went into hoopla and said, oh, no, you can't do that.
Right.
And Theodore Reich said, but this is not consistent with Freud's
idea
of who should be allowed to practice analysis.
Okay.
So Freud wrote a book called The Question of Lay Analysis in support of Theodore Reich. And as a result of that book and his support and Theodore Reich's efforts, an institute, NPAP, was started on, I think it's on 13th Street right now.
Right.
And it accepted people with degrees in French literature. Or physics. Or anything.
And that's where you were involved?
No, my analyst, Phyllis Meadow, trained at NPAP, and then she broke off from NPAP and started her own institute, which is called the Center for Modern Psychoanalytic Studies.
And that's where
I trained.
Okay, that's good.
And that center is still, it's on 13th Street, and it's still alive and thriving and training people every day, and it is an amazing...
It's not part of the new school, is it?
No.
No, it's not, but it's down right next to it.
Yeah.
They're down in that good part of Greenwich Village. Yeah. A lot of good stuff's come
I'm sorry,
out
it's
of
on 10th Street.
Well, that's still a good part of Greenwich Village. Yeah, anyway. And that's where you trained, and then it was a long training, and I remember psychoanalytic training was a long process, and it was very involved, and you had to be psychoanalyzed yourself, and being psychoanalyzed in the full sense of the word is a huge process. It's not a over-the-weekend thing, but fascinating, yeah. And core to the psychology principle. I mean, there's I just think of Freud or Mesmer before him or something, but he was giant in terms of giving us a breakthrough in terms of understanding the whole process of consciousness and its evolution and development. I don't know, like you said, Darwin.
The difference between what modern psychoanalysts believe and what Freud did is that his whole thinking and his practice of analysis was very intellectual.
Yeah.
He used interpretation.
Right.
And so you had to really, have a lot of cognitive development. You had to be fairly smart.
Right.
He tells you what's wrong and why it's wrong, and you have to be able to kind of digest that and then somehow process it in a way that it it means change. And what Spotnitz discovered, and
Yeah.
Freud felt that if you did not have what we call a positive transference, if you didn't really like the analyst, then it couldn't work. Now, if you have a patient who really doesn't like very many people, who's filled with self-hate, and as a result of that projects out onto the world that the world is a horrible place, this person's not going to form a positive experience with or a positive relationship with the analyst. Spotnitz understood that you could work with what we call a negative transference. You can work with aggression, back to the death instinct.
We want to get to your book about the dark side of love, right?
Modern analysts believe that you can work therapeutically when all somebody brings into you as an analyst is a lot of aggression.
Just get up above it and be able to figure it all out and get to it. Yeah,
it all has to be put into words.
Also, it also gets to be where a lot of those things that are put on the light side of things, or the beautiful side, or the love side of things, tend to be, Ashley Montague used to be somebody I admire, but we're on the feminine side of seeing things. They tend to see things in a way that really, it's the men who go out and hit each other on the head. The violence seems to be more in the male side of things. I hate to get into gender because it just seems like it's part of the universe. But you know, you got, you know, so.
Well, when I said that the female, the one-day-old female baby, wants to look at a human face, what Simon Baron-Cohen understood in tracking this for years after the first day is that the female brain wants connection, and so females are inherently more connected to their own feeling states. It is in us
as
biologically.
Opposed to thinking.
As opposed to conceptualizing, analyzing, classification. So I said that he was the head of the Department of Autism. Why is a man who's the head of autism looking at one-day-old babies? Because what autistic people do better than anyone is break things down into classifications. They organize. They can't
Is that the same as pattern recognition?
Well, there's some relationship to that. It's not exactly the same. But
because we're very good at pattern recognition.
Males.
No, well, Homo sapiens, but you know, But anyway,
some of us aren't. Females are much better at emotional recognition.
They seem to be there much more. There, Bucky Fuller would divide it down. The only thing that exists in the universe, and string theory seems to bring it out, is pressure and compression. I mean, tension and compression. And tension is going through the whole of the thing with a kind of verticalness, and reality is like a soccer ball. It's like a soccer ball, and it's connected, and then you got compression. And evolution began about 3.8 billion years ago. And there was not, how did we get from the things pre-evolution, pre-organic to that? And the vast majority of that process was taken up at the level of bacteria, out of which there was a, you know, but that, but there was this, metaphor I sometimes use is if you're a 650 million years ago, the fauna was all uniform, unicellular spongiform. And if you could imagine uniform spongiform laying around and it's kind of flat, and then they would say, this is cool, let's put up curtains. Let's make this really nice where we are now. You know, it's a thing, it's steady state. All the visions of steady state, things staying the same. And then there was an impetus to change. And then that would build up. And there would be this impetus to where you get it resonating, the tension resonating through the whole of the system, resonating to where everyone is covered in a systems way rather than extensions of an idea. You can see Napoleon. He'd be pushing up the tension, the male. It'd be going like, and then when it resonates on the edge of that, it might be what they call punctuated equilibrium. You get speciation or qualitative transformation into new species and all the variety that exists. So that's a different view of things. I don't know. I didn't want to get off on that. But anyway, that's just the sort of where I think we might be now. Do you think we're at a time of qualitative transformation in the evolution of consciousness now? Or maybe that's off the point, really. But there's a lot of tension.
I think there's a reason why psychoanalysis has been allowed to grow and flourish in this day and age. And I think that the reason why is because, and it has to do with our interest in consciousness. It's not that people haven't been interested in consciousness throughout history, but in living in this time, we have the pleasure and the ability to focus on things inside our heads as opposed to struggling for survival, having to think about where our next meal is or where our next shelter is.
Which is most of the evolutionary processes involved. And then we do have the...
And a lot of the world today still.
Yeah, oh yeah, and in the whole...
So it's not an accident that it arose in Europe and that it was imported into America.
You're talking about the psychoanalytic, right, okay.
Well, but not just psychoanalysis. Any system of thought that explores consciousness.
Yeah, or evolution itself, for that matter. You know, you got that kind of a thing. It's there, and so that's what we have. And then you get the speciation, you get a new thing, and all that. And we have a unique capability to extend consciousness through tools and technology into the environment and make it other than in the Eden-like sense is given, which is most of the creatures that are part of the, and it's all one system. We're all one system. And now you've got, if you take the measurement of consciousness or intellectual function in the universe or something, we seem to be able to extend that consciousness out and make the world different. I mean, a bear comes upon a cave. We could come upon a cave and live in it, but we could also make a house, and we can make things different. And we got that capability. And now we're coming to a... Do you think we're at a period of, they used to say the age of the coming of Aquarius or something, back in the good old Woodstock days is the dawning, that there is a moment that we're approaching of qualitative transformation in the broader evolution of consciousness itself? There was consciousness before there was Homo sapien.
Well, Harold, what do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think we're at a moment of birth.
Are we in for a financial meltdown that's going to bring the whole country back to the man of...
Well, that would be putting
Stone Age?
I don't think it'd take it back. Yeah, well, we could get into that, yeah.
Because if that's going to happen, we're probably not going to be so interested in consciousness anymore.
Oh, I know. We'd have interested in the thing. And it's all contained in our, the Olympic, or what do you call it, the reptilian core, where it's all part of our consciousness. Then the neocortex comes, and it's an evolutionary process. And it's all one system. It began with bacteria. Most of the time it was just bacteria. We've come out of that. So we're at a time of, and there have been qualitative transformations or speciation, particularly up the line of conscious understanding of the process of which we're a part. And it's here. And we now reached a point where that technological extension, I believe, is now been used to develop within a male-oriented kind of tribal kind of thing where they could take and create weapons that gave them an advantage over the tribe in the other village. They could go steal the grain for their tribe. Nationalism, all that kind of stuff is gone. And now the weapon systems that exist, I saw Mr. Gorbachev on television yesterday and so on, that they're species lethal now, since about 1970. Einstein came along and gave us theory of relativity, special theory, atom, hydrogen, and that we now have species lethal. We could used to be able to wipe out the tribe in the other village in the historical context, and so now we can wipe out the entire species and cut cold this whole evolution of consciousness that we call Homo sapien.
Freud wrote a book called...
That's a gigantic death wish kind of thing.
He wrote Civilization and Its Discontents.
Yeah, right.
And he wrote that after the war and... or during the war, and came to feel very pessimistic. I mean, he lost his home. He had to flee to England.
Yeah.
So I think, like shyness is, we have genetic blueprint for. I think we probably have a genetic blueprint for optimism versus pessimism. So whether or not we're going to pull ourselves out of this financial crunch and still have a civilization where we can pay attention to consciousness, or whether we're returning back to caveman times, I think how you think about that depends on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist.
Yeah,
and probably no more than that.
No more than that thinking.
Just whether you want to think happily about the future, or whether you're programmed to think unhappily about the future.
Programmed that way.
And part of the programming comes from your early experience.
Yeah, like when you get out of the womb, how you were treated by your mother or something, and all that, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, well, it may be, except that there are processes that have a life of their own. I mean, we could have tried to be talking about this 600 million years ago. We wouldn't be able to articulate it because it was a long process of dazzling gradually with change, and that you get to a point where It's really an incredible time to be alive, participant, and conscious now, and it's very crucial. It's like a birth. A birth in a Homo sapien, the gestation within the womb is like 9 months. An elephant is 22 months, right? And then they're going to go into a new environment. So that's called punctuated equilibrium or speciation, that if we navigate it, if we navigate this tension between compression and tension, the male and the female, the east and the west, the up and the down, and all the other dialectics we've been while we've been in the womb gestating during the human experience, we may be coming into a new relationship in the cosmos along an evolutionary line that would bring us into contact collectively as a fulfilling of the purpose that we've had running across entropy, second law, and that we may fulfill our conscience, but that this is a time like the water's about to break in terms of the broader evolution of the whole of evolution of consciousness in this particular part of universe, or this particular planet, in this particular part of universe, and that we're privileged to be alive at a time like that. Do you think that way at all, or do you think there's a qualitative? It may be like liberation, because we have an averse to the destructive scenario. We have a capability of taking care of everybody in a way we've never had, technologically extended, and also for all the creatures and the ecology.
You're just asking me whether I'm a pessimist or optimist.
Actually, yes, and what the basis for our being either one or the other is, and if so, how do we use that to figure out what we're going to do in the real world? How we're going to deal with the situation, the existential situation that we're in. When we get to the point where we can destroy the entire species, you can't just play the same old games that we've been playing. You know, that's what I'm saying. And you got a liberating potentiality. It's all at the level of capability, collectively as a whole society. And we don't have visionary leadership that's going to be able to try and lead us there, but it's a time of great challenge. Do you feel that?
Well, I find it interesting that you say we don't have great leadership, and yet you seem to be on the side of the fence of optimism.
Well, I would want to be. I mean, I think it's a great time. Don't you? You don't feel that we're at a time of qualitative transformation?
I feel.
I mean, the whole system, the whole Earth system, and there's signals all over the place that the water's about to break, and we've been living in a condition that's been qualitatively changed in the whole, or the whole of everything, everything. It's been qualitatively changed, and we have institutions formulated out of the past we got to have, but we don't have the relationship to the future that we have to, a transformation, a gigantic transformation that affects everything, including the way we think about ourselves and everyone else that we relate to, and the ecology, and so forth. That's the way I feel that the time is.
Harold, there's a difference between the way your brain works and the way my brain works.
Okay.
Your brain works globally.
Yeah.
You're thinking about very large questions. As a psychoanalyst, I just think one-to-one.
Okay.
I'm with a single person.
Okay.
They're lying on my couch, and I'm listening to their reality.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I don't ask myself the questions you ask yourself.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't get off on that, but that's just the way I think it is. But there are 100 trillion cells in the human organism, and they all matter. You know, and each one is important, you know, that way. Are you optimistic, or maybe I can't say, are you optimistic or pessimistic for the well, you can't do that because you want to keep it individual, right? You want to keep it down to an individual within the pattern.
In spite of myself, sometimes my brain does ask that question.
Well, you were into parapsychology and understanding these larger issues and so forth.
You know why I want to be in parapsychology?
Why?
Because I really just want to know the future.
Okay, well, that's
because if we could know the future, we wouldn't have to dread the future. So that's really the question. Are we going to rejoice about the future, or are we going to dread the future? Do we have a future that seems dreadful? Or do we have? You seem to feel that we have a future that is celebratory.
Well, I don't know that we can know that we have what we have. I think it's up for grabs, is what I'm saying. It's synergetic. The universe is synergetic. It's all behavioral systems unpredicted by the sum of the parts. They're all systems, and they're interrelated. And if you get systems overload in one field, then you get pattern recognition of a larger context. And the largest context I can get my mind around, short of spirituality and so forth, is that some sort of a coming to the end of 200,000 years of human experience in terms of the broader cosmos. So I think we're just coming to a time of, like, liberation if we make it. If we don't, we might, but there are probably lots of systems out in the universe that got to that point and then could not make the transition and joined entropy, or just did themselves in.
So
it's like a death wish and a eros on a big scale, you know. This characteristic of the time you and I sit and talk.
In terms of what you're seeing, one would think that you would predict that more people are psychically communicating today than did 5,000 years ago.
I like James Joyce. He's the best reader of technology. He says history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken, of injustice in terms of the releasing of the potential of each member of the heading for 10 billion human society being able to realize their full potential, like psychoanalytic kind of concerns want to have happen for each cell in the organism called the collective human consciousness. And that there will be a resonancy, like an orchestra, that will relate us to universe if we make that transition. And if not, we can join the second law of thermodynamics and destroy this line of anti-entropic function in the universe that is Homo sapien. You know, and we're alive. We could have lived 200,000, we could have lived 1,000 years ago, and it took decades to invent a tack. Now, every day, the research is coming in. Mr. Freud comes, a giant. Mr. Darwin comes, neurotransmitters. We understand things. We now extend the consciousness through computers and capability to communicate. We have a technologically augmented. Nanotechnology is only a couple of 3 years down the track. We can get over scarcity. We can get over material scarcity. We have all this capability if we have our systems right and our understanding. And so it's a time of incredible interest and tension in the universe between all of the dialectics that have been characteristic of history. So it's very exciting.
However,
yes,
we have a death drive.
Well, that's the death drive that is the... probably if you were Nick the Greek, that's probably what we're going to do.
We don't know the end of the story.
No, we don't. We don't. We're in the womb. We don't know it, but it's coming close. And it's coming now down to where we actually are in the birth canal. And we're actually getting to the point, because it has to, there's no such thing as individual liberation. It's a collective liberation of the whole system. The whole organism is now full term. You got to have it get to everybody. You got to liberate everybody.
What happens in birth?
Well, then
it's really painful.
Well, for
everybody.
Well, it is. It's called hard labor if you have hard labor.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. We're in hard labor. And we're doing that, and we're just getting ready to leave the womb, and we do not have, and we've got all kinds of, the nation state, notions of economics, incomplete knowledge of the whole of the system that interrelates as a whole system, like Gaia. The idea of Gaia is coming now. That's a feminine thing. It's a thing because that compression wants to have it include the whole. The tension wants to get through vertically. And you got to have that vertical resonating on the edge of the compression for the whole system, and that would be the uniting of those two things in order for it not to have to surrender to ignorance, or in a bodhisattva sense. The bodhisattva is samadhi, these theories, and they're going to come back, and rather than enjoy the nectar of samadhi or something, they're going to come back and make sure everybody gets through the fence. It's a collectivist whole, a collectivist responsibility. Bodhisattva, they go through last. But everybody's trying to run through the gate to get their own liberation and that kind of thing, you know. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. I shouldn't have. Your book.
No, getting off on a tangent is exactly what psychoanalysis is about.
Is it?
Yeah, psychoanalysis is about free association.
Okay.
And you really begin to understand mental functioning when you let somebody's mind just wander.
Oh, yeah.
And you come to very interesting places.
Well, I don't know about that, but I shouldn't get carried away. The book, The Darker Side of Love. You wrote a book, The Dark Side of Love. That was an interesting book, and we want to let them know also you got the day spa. You're doing that. You're in and you've got this cure for radiation being involved in the cure for cancers that are coming out of Italy, and then the other thing. Maybe you could get some of that. Let people know about that now. With me, I'll stop talking. I'm sorry. I carried on. Sorry, but yeah.
I wouldn't say that I have a cure for cancer.
No.
I would say that I've done a lot of research, and I've written a book, which was published, just came out about 3 weeks ago, called Because People Are Dying.
Yes.
And it's the story of the therapeutic application of low-level radiation.
Yes.
which in fact does reverse many, many afflictions, if not pretty much all afflictions that plague us.
Yeah, it's a fungus or something, right?
Well, the point of low-level radiation is that we are radioactive deficient. Just like we have deficiencies, most of us are probably selenium deficient.
Yeah, right.
Some of us are vitamin A deficient, and so you need, and part of why we're deficient is because our soil is no longer as rich as it used to be.
Okay.
Why we're radioactive deficient is because the Earth itself is a radioactive entity.
Yeah.
And when we walk on Earth, we absorb the radiation, and that's how life evolved.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking a lot about evolution.
Yeah.
Radiation, there would be no life without radiation.
Right.
It rains down upon us from the cosmos,
Right.
and it seeps up from the inner bowels of the Earth.
Right.
So when we were walking barefoot on Earth, when we were Native Americans, for instance, then we were more radioactive beings. But now we are on concrete and shoes.
Yeah, right.
So we are radioactive deficient. So what we've found, and what's odd about this phenomenon, is that there are over 3,000 medical studies that document this effect. It's known in almost every country except ours.
Yes.
And there's lots of there are controlled studies that have been done that show that this is a real effect.
Yeah, and this is something that an add-on to our knowledge that could help us get to a situation where the human society could be better,
would be healthier,
serving themselves and the ecology.
Would be healthier, would feel better, would be healthier, and would live longer.
Not bad idea, I think. That's a really good idea, and it should be gotten out, and you're doing that. Congratulations on the book. It's a major book, and it's really coming out. We only got about a minute left, and so the day spa, that's something you're doing. You're involved with the holistic, I guess, health movement, and you've got a day spa here in New York and also one in Puerto Rico. That's an important part of your life, too? Okay. You have anything you want to say? Where is it? It's on 20th Street or?
Yeah, 20th between Park and Broadway, La Casa de Spa. I do want to make the differentiation between high-level radiation, which is what Western medicine uses in radiation therapy for cancer, and X-rays. That's high-level, and that is not low-level. We use stones.
Yes,
we go out with Geiger counters and we find stones that are radioactive, and the people that are using this therapy, we wear it around our necks and we drink radioactive.
Is that one you have there?
Yeah, this is a radioactive.
Yeah, right.
Don't get too close to me. I'm hot.
Hormesis?
Radiation hormesis.
Radiation hormesis, and this is part of an understanding of things that should be gotten out. And
again, it's a scientific principle that has been known for over 100 years, which is that low level stimulates and high level kills. High level radiation kills cells.
There's a metaphor.
Low level stimulates growth and health.
The great poem of Emily Dickinson, Dazzle Gradually, might fit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but anyway.
I love that, Dazzle Gradually.
Yeah, Dazzle Gradually is a beautiful poem that says, we have to dazzle gradually or every man be blind. It's a beautiful, I'll send you a link to it. It's a beautiful poem. So thanks a lot for such a very well-led life, Jane, because it continues so well. And I really thank you for coming in, for doing the program. I really appreciate it. Sorry I got off on a rant, but anyway, it's interconnected.
You were a very good patient.
Oh, thank you. Welcome to the couch. Anyway, your pleasure.